We are located along Parliamentary Avenue, that is Raja Chambers. And basically, we have been in existence for over 10 years, basically training organizations about what they call employee assistance programs in relation to mental health. Allow me, in the interest of time, just share my slide so that we can delve into the agenda of today.
Okay. Yes,
Okay.
you can share your slide.
Is everyone able to look at my slide?
Yes, we can see. I can see your slide, Deo.
Okay. Okay. So this is briefly who we are. A free mind is basically a mental health firm invested in promotion of good mental health practices in companies and basically to individuals by use of evidence-based interventions like psychotherapy. Psychotherapy here, I just mean talk therapy. We do this through training and other evidence-based strategies to ensure that these mental health disorders are managed at workplaces and at individual level. I would want to delve into the discussion of today. And just before I delve into the discussion of today, I would just want to share an overview of what is happening around the spectrum of mental health. And in summary, there is an estimation that about 15% and more of working age adults live with these mental health disorders globally. This is statistics that is evidence-based and has been done by reputable health entities like the World Health Organization and UNICEF. It is also known that out of this research that 1 in every 8 people in the globe lives with a certain kind of mental disorder. And it was estimated that before COVID-19, that was in 2020, about 116 million people had mental health issues. That was a study that was done by World Health Organization before COVID-19 set in. There is an estimation and a projection that this number has increased post-COVID-19 because many businesses, many individuals, and even reputable entities like government were strained, and there is an expectation that these numbers has grown. And when we look at the projections still by WHO and other world reputable health organizations, there is an estimation that by 2030, there is a likelihood that about more than 300 million people will be experiencing these mental disorders, specifically in the sub-Saharan Africa. When we look at the context of Uganda, Uganda is ranked among the top 6 countries, you know, with mental health disorders in Africa. And the first being Lesotho, and the least, I think, being South Africa. And when we look at in the context of Uganda, approximately 32% of Ugandans, equivalent to 15 million, are estimated to be having these mental disorders. When we talk about mental disorders, one may think it is something so huge, it is something that is clinically diagnosed, or and some even attribute it to, I can say, madness, which is not ideally the case here. I will just take us through this information so that we are well versed and we get a clear context of what this mental disorder really means. Looking at the statistics in Uganda, where it is projected that estimated that 32% of Ugandans are having one or two mental health disorders of a sort. When we look at the statistics of professional psychologists and psychiatrists, Uganda has only 53 psychiatrists. And on average, we have about 2,300 professional and licensed psychologists. What does this mean? We still have low manpower professionally to attend to even the 15 million people expected to be having these mental disorders. So the strategy is being training trainers, working with organizations to ensure that each person plays a pivotal role in ensuring that people operate normally within a workplace setting and even in families. Now, looking at these statistics, the 53 psychiatrists, looking at the 2,300 professional licensed psychologists and so on, and Uganda being ranked among the top 6 countries with these mental disorders. These things are prevalent within our communities.
Andrew, Andrew, are you
what
able
does
to...
this say?
Hello, Andrew.
Uganda spends about 9.8% of its GDP on healthcare annually, but only 1% goes to into mental health care. So there is still a lag. And what does this mean? There is need for a concerted effort by each and every person to ensure that we alleviate, we manage this kind of disorders within our family settings and within our workplace settings. So organizations have a role to play in managing or in contributing towards, mental health within the work setting. It shouldn't be something only left to government as it is portrayed, because one, there is a small budget, as we can see, and we haven't embraced, talking about this mental health cases within the work setting. So this overview gives us a basic on what the core problem is in our day-to-day living, and how it affects ideally, or how it may have a trickle-down effect on how organizations and SMEs and of course, even established enterprises may operate. One would ask what a mental disorder is.
Andrew. Hello, Andrew.
A mental disorder, if to simply put, is
Andrew.
Ideally a state in which someone is not able to operate well mentally. Now, if we go into the scientific definition of what mental health or what mental health disorders may be, it is simply characterized by clinically significant disturbances, in an individual's cognition, emotional regulation, or behavior. Being in a state where you do not or you are not able to function well normally, cognitively, renders one to have a specific kind of disorder. Now, when we're to look at the diagnostic manual, the diagnostic and the statistic manual for mental health disorders, we have a list of so many disorders that some I have not even included in today's presentation. Many may be experiencing some kind of disorders, but they may not know this is a disorder. So among the commonest types of mental disorders people are experiencing, one is stress. And this happens, and I believe each and everyone in this space and out there could have encountered or experienced a moment when they're overtaken by something. And to simply put it, that is a state of stress. Now, we have anxiety disorders. We have things like depression. We have things like bipolar disorder, trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder, schizophrenia. The schizophrenia here, we're talking about the people who we call mad on the streets, people who you see are not bathing, people who are dirty, and people who are in street just not able even to ascertain that they have a mental health condition. That is schizophrenia. These are people we see on streets, sleeping on streets and so on, not being even able to, take care of themselves. Now, those are people who are experiencing what they call schizophrenia. So it is not madness as society has contextualized it. Things like eating disorder, these are things that are prevalent. Disruptive behavior and dissocial disorder. These are all kinds of mental health disorder that are listed under the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM-5. The neurodevelopmental disorders like autism, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, trauma, sexual dysfunctions, sexual dysphoria, and so on. So there is a list of so many kind of disorders that if we are to mention and stipulate each of them one by one, it could take us a whole entire day. The kleptomania, people who steal what they do not need, those are all kinds of disorders, hoarding disorder, and so on. But in the interest of today's presentation, I would want to delve our discussion specifically on the most commonest disorders in our society, in our work environment, in our family system. And having mentioned that, as enterprises, as SMEs and medium and small scale enterprises, these mental health disorders we talk about, or that I have highlighted above there, have a cost, and there is always a trickle-down effect of these things, the thing we call mental disorder in society and even in our workplaces. It is estimated that about 12 billion working days are lost every year to depression and anxiety alone. One may look at maybe stress and anxiety and depression and any kind of disorder as something that may not affect a work environment or a workplace or a company. But these things have a trickle-down effect on the performance of an employee. Because one, it could bring about absenteeism or something like presentism. Presentism is someone is available at work. You're seeing Jane is at work, yes, but Jane is not performing. She's just there to satisfy the interest of the boss of presence, wanting to be just seen at work. Yes, someone is there, but they're not working, So it is estimated that 12 billion days, are lost every year to depression through either things like presentism or things like absenteeism, and of course, mental disorders are directly and indirectly indirectly cost the global economy. About this is a study that was done by WHO as well. The world loses approximately $2.5 trillion every year, predominantly from reduced productivity. Someone comes at work, you see someone is present, yes, but someone is not productive. So why is this happening? There is a sense of complacency within us entrepreneurs, within employers, that whichever mental issue one is dealing with is not their concern, yet not knowing that this has a trickle-down effect. And this is only seen in a long run when it is too late. The cumulative economic output loss associated with mental disorders, is projected to be actually just a little.
Hello, Andrew. Andrew, can you hear me? Andrew, can you hear me?
Okay. Sorry about that. The cumulative economic output loss associated with this mental disorder is expected to be actually about 16.3 trillion shillings by 2030. What does this mean? If these mental health cases are not handled as urgently as possible, it could have an impact in how a company operates, specifically a direct impact on revenues, because that ideally means either employees are not performing to their expectation because they are dealing with some sort of, mental health challenge, that because of how or the structure, how the organization is structured, that doesn't tolerate, employees even speaking up. Of course, there is a projection that it could, impact the operation of your business and its revenue. Mental health disorders and substance abuse, cost businesses between $80 million to $100 billion annually. And we've also, from research, gotten to know that serious mental cases has impacted, how businesses earn annually. Yeah. So the direct and the indirect economic cost of mental health issues can be seen below. The direct ones, the direct costs involve healthcare costs, where, of course, if one is struggling with the mental health case or something, employers have to, directly, give in money to support. You know, these are direct costs, and these are seen by these are directly seen. Income support and so on, through insurance and so on. These are things that, of course, impact businesses directly. The indirect costs of mental health disorders are absenteeism, presenteeism, as I earlier talked about, attending work while one is unwell, but they're not productive, and so on. Others are employee turnover, where someone is not okay mentally, and just because they're not okay, it affects on either they should leave work or they should come to work. Why is it important for us to incorporate these mental health trainings or mental health employee assistance programs at workplaces? One, ideally, this helps boost workplace productivity, to optimize return on investments. A healthy workforce means more revenue will be generated, means high performance or higher performance, and so on and so forth. It is also important because the staff get practical skills, to reorganize and manage their own mental health issues that dealing with. And anyone, of course, within a work setting who could be having, the same. So training ideally helps these people get the skills, to help themselves and help those at risk. It is it's also important for companies to incorporate this kind of employee assistance programs within the work setting, because it fosters a supportive workplace environment, ideally to protect and improve mental wellness. And this can be done through either working with the HR team or identifying a health committee within a workforce, within an organization that, helps nurture positive, work behaviors, or helps attend to employees who could be having a challenge, creating this kind of healthy spaces within within a work environment helps employees to open up, because once one opens up, they feel they're heard, and therefore they're able to speak about their challenges. So incorporating all the importance of these trainings or employee assistance programs within a work setting, helps advance employees' human growth and development, including the social, the personal, emotional, and cognitive aspect. A mentally healthy workforce matters now more than ever. Why? One would ask, why are we talking about mental health or mental health disorders? Companies need to embrace, as entrepreneurs, we need to embrace this, because you get to notice that the people we are working with attend to so many needs or are dealing with a lot of things out there. And once the thing they're dealing with affects them, it means it's going to affect even how they perform at work. And what does this mean? It will mean low productivity. It will mean non-performance. At the end of it, it will mean lesser revenue generated. So it is important that entrepreneurs you know, embrace this mental health kind of talk with employees to better productivity or to boost productivity, you know. It is also important for entrepreneurs or young small scale enterprises to embrace this because one, we as people in business need to retain employees or the people we work with. How do we do that? We can only do that by ensuring that, okay, we listen to our employees' concerns. We get to understand what employees are dealing with. Apart from just giving someone salary, there is a lot more for us entrepreneurs to do, apart from just thinking about company growth. Because much as we're thinking about company growth, that company growth comes from how well an employee is mentally. It all starts with the employee. So why is it important that we incorporate this mental health within our workplaces? One is, you know, to attract, you know, strong talent. You know, people enjoy working with where they are respected, they are heard, you know, where their concerns are, you know, are listened to, and so on. It is also important because there is more effective risk management and greater engagement among employees and employers. One would ask, why are we talking about these mental health issues at work? This graph can just give you a description of how people operate. There are those who thrive within the work environment, you know, this big green circle. There are those who struggle within the work environment, you know. Then there are those, you know, who can be possibly off the work environment simply because they're dealing with a specific kind of mental disorder. So at any one time, employees will be thriving, but with frequent movements within how best they are heard at work or how they are neglected at work, you know. And being neglected at work means the boss is not attending to the employee's concern. And when we're talking about attending to the employee's concern, we're talking about not only attending to their financial, maybe struggles through salaries and so on. We're talking about how best do you give time to, you know, an employee? How best how do you teamwork within a work environment? So all these things have a trickle-down effect on the performance of how an organization, you know, operates. One would ask, what could be the general cause? What are the causes of these disorders? And I have just highlighted a few here. This disorder, the causes can be environmental, they can be, you know, socially caused, they can be genetically caused. Like schizophrenia is ideally genetically caused a disorder. One could inherit it from, you know, a great grandparent or something like that. So the general causes, some that I've highlighted here: unpredictable change, you know, sudden changes at, let's say, at workplaces, can cause stress. Isolation from family and from friends, overwhelming responsibilities, within the work setting or within a home setting or within even a social setting. When one feels that overwhelmed by what they have been given, this would trigger stress. Much as there is good stress and bad stress, good stress is good in one to work. It propels one to meet a desired goal. The bad stress is where one now has work, but they're not able to do because they feel they're overwhelmed, they're broken down. So among the other causes of this kind of disorders are financial worries, uncertainty, social stressors, and I highlighted here the organizational causes. And in my highlight here, I looked at the content cause and the context, of the work. When I talked about some of the causes in terms of content, the workload, how much work do we expect out of our employees? Sometimes we employ people, but we give them more than what they should be doing. To us, we may be saving financially, yes, but then we get in a long run to notice that these people can, work, yes, but they're strained. But even the work they're doing, the too much work they're doing, either they're not doing it to perfection as it should be if it were broken down in different kind of stages. Participation and control. The job content. When we look at the context, the role in the organization, the reward system, all these are things that happen within an organization, but we don't know that it causes, in one way or the other, a mental health kind of issue. I talked about the workload. Is it excessive? Is it insufficient? Because someone can also get stressed when they're given less work than they should be doing. I talked about the lack of participation and control. Some people get stressed when they are not given chance, to participate in decision making, and yet they should be either participating. The inability to choose how to complete work. Sometimes as employers, we direct, but we do not guide. And ideally what we direct doesn't necessarily mean is right. Someone you're working with could be having a different strategy, a different way of how to conduct or how to meet a specific task or goal, and just because we as either entrepreneurs or as bosses within an organization setting, we dictate how certain things should be working, which could be right, yes, but it is normally prudent to give a listening ear on a different perspective, or how someone else perceives the person you're working, how best they perceive what you want them to do. The job content, the monotonous tasks, these are things that cause stress. Unpleasant tasks, aversive tasks, do this, do that, a killer combination. How is your teamwork? How is your team cohesion within the work environment? You know, we have so many people within the HR setting. Do they have the ability to work together? These are questions that we need to ask ourselves within a work setting, because ideally at the end of the day, it has an impact on one's mental health, which would have a trickle-down effect on how a person performs at work. In the context of work, the role in the organization, these are all things that trigger, may be a trigger to a person's, maybe a trigger to one's disorder. Role conflict, role ambiguities. You know, when we talk about lack of reward, do we recognize our employees well at work? You know, the status, how well do we position our employees at work? How well do we support, you know, them at work? Inequities, lack of fairness. How does this impact the mental wellness of the employees? You know, when we look at the perception that people have, you know, at workplaces, do they have a perception that, you know, they are treated fairly within a work setting? All these are things that affect or may affect how one operates mentally. When we look at the interpersonal relationships, how do we work with people? How do we relate with people within a work environment? Are we supportive or are we unsupportive? You know, how is the relationship among colleagues? How is the organization operating? Is there harassment? Are employees bullied? Because some of us bosses, we may not know that we bully our employees, but without knowing. But when you get to understand in a much later stage, we get to know that, okay, I think I was unfair to this employee based on the demands I put in them to perform things beyond their expectations. So there are quite a lot of things that could cause mental disorders within a work setting. We're talking about the workplace culture. How good or how bad is the communication in a work setting? You know, how good is the leadership or how bad is the leadership? Is there clarity about what the organization expects of an employee? Is there clarity of what an employee expects out of their boss? What is the structure of work, you know, and so on. So these are all things that cause mental health disorders at work that would affect on productivity, that would affect on attrition, that would affect on performance. So how these mental disorders affects us? We have physical effects, we have emotional effects, social effects, spiritual, behavioral, you know, in a humanistic perspective. So the cognitive perspective, one, ideally this affects us in a way that we give less attention to what we're supposed to do. Physically, we have trouble in sleeping, you know, behavioral wise or emotional wise. This affects us in a way that we are anxious, we are irritable, we have low esteem. Socially, people isolate, people tend to be lonely. So all these things affects us in this way. And ideally, it means this would have a trickle-down effect on the performance of an employee within the work setting. Employers and employees need to look out for the sources of stress and coping mechanisms. You'll get to understand that this chart is unbalanced and this is unhealthy within a work setting. If we are in a workplace and we are not able to identify the triggers that I earlier mentioned out, which are the sources of stress or other mental disorders, it means it is going to affect how we operate. It's going to affect how we generate revenues. It is going to affect our productivity. It is going to affect presentism or absenteeism, So it is important for us to understand sources of this stress and mitigate them for the good of the organization. This is to just ensure a good work-life balance. What are some of the strategies that we can adopt as entrepreneurs? Or what are the strategies we can adopt within our workplaces to ensure that people work normally without inconveniences? We first of all need to know, we need to be aware about mental issues, mental, emotional issues. Sometimes we do not pay attention to wanting to know what is necessary. It is important that we get the knowledge to understand that these mental cases, these emotional cases are prevalent within our people. And therefore, by dealing with them, identifying the sources and mitigating them, or having what they call primary interventions, where there are things like self-care, then that ideally means we would operate well and normally. We need to embrace the aspect of supporting employees at risk. This is ideally by dealing with the stigma. When someone comes to work, someone is not happy, someone is moody, or you really see someone is not in their right state. We do not need, as employees, to first contact a psychologist, to first contact a psychiatrist to deal with an issue at hand. There is what is called psychological first aid. Do we have this psychological first aid measures within a work setting to ensure that, okay, when someone is not okay, can we call them to the boardroom? Can we call them to, a quiet space within a work environment where we can talk to them to ensure that we understand, or give them a listening ear to deal with whatever they're struggling with? Now, these are things that we need to start learning as organizations. cases where psychological first aid doesn't work, then ideally it means someone's mental case is severe, and therefore, as a responsible entity with, let's say, a health committee or under the human resource arrangement, we onboard maybe a licensed practitioner like a psychologist or a psychiatrist to administer treatment, to these employees. We also need to change how we work within the organization setting, either by looking at our work culture, how healthy is it or how unhealthy is it? And if it is unhealthy, what do we do to ensure that, the employees' wellness is put at the core to ensure that they perform normally? We need to reintegrate employees with problems in workplaces rather than chasing them. When we see someone coming in, Sylvia has walked into office today, and they're not really okay. Maybe someone is angry, someone responds to customers in a rude way. Normally, what we do within the work setting, we rush to judge, not understanding that, oh, this person could be behaving in this way because, one, ideally, they could be dealing with something. And understanding that aspect, that someone needs to be listened to within that circumstance is core. And accepting these people rather than judging them helps them, reframe, what they call reframe, reflect on what they're doing, and therefore understand boundaries between what they should do at work and what they shouldn't do at work. Understanding what problems should be left at home and what problems should be transferred to work. So as employers and employees, we need to listen, we need to reintegrate, we need to accept, people in a work environment the way they are. But by accepting, I mean listening to them and being in position to talk with them through what they're going or what they're dealing with, to ensure that, this is managed to ideally foster a calm work environment. One of the strategies also to adopt good mental health practices at work is to use lunchtime for social activities and walking around, speaking with the other people, also setting the expectations that people don't respond to emails overnight or over weekends. We just need to know when someone delays to respond, or there is a lag in a way one communicates. We need to understand, okay, why is this person like this, rather than just judging them, because this judgment ideally brings about stigma. And it means, one, they will not be able to talk about what they're dealing with. And ideal, that means at the end of the day, less productivity or unproductivity. Normalize talking about these mental disorders, within a work setting. Encourage employees to talk. Create quiet spaces for relaxation within a work setting. Once we notice that someone is not well, we can always find, could be a boardroom, it could be a safe space within a work environment where we can put this person and identify a person within a health committee or within the HR to talk to, to this person. It would also be good to train managers to recognize, signs and symptoms of these mental health challenges among team members. And this is not rocket science, for one to be able to identify, signs and symptoms. Anyone can learn these signs and symptoms, but we need to subject employees to these trainings for one to, be able to identify these mental challenges. Engage employees in team building activities or physical activities. These are things that most times we look at as expensive, but then ideally when we compare it to the cost that it brings, if not done, the cost would be higher, than the benefit. So team building activities within a work setting is good because it puts employees in a state where they're able to socialize with others, they're able to be away from the likely things that, stress them from work and so on. Having meaningful retreats, having clear leadership support for employee assistance programs and ensuring confidentiality around them. All these are strategies that we can adopt within a work setting to ensure that employees are mentally well. Involving employees, by this I mean soliciting feedback about whatever happens in an organization. This only positions employees in a way that they feel heard or listened to in whatever happens within a work setting. Ask employees what stresses them, within a work environment. Ask them what they like to do, what changes they would want, and so on and so forth. This only positions or puts employees in a way that they are heard, and therefore it motivates them, to work and even perform. I talked about creating a workplace wellness committee. This is something that can be done under the HR arrangement because ideally we get to know that maybe some organizations have more than just one human resource employee. So we can ideally try to create a team within the workplace to ensure that they respond to mental health related issues, mental health crises, and training them through things like what they call a first line psychological first aid, attendance, things like primary care management of mental health disorders. These are things that are manageable to avoid, ideally, the cost of bringing consultants from out to train employees. Individual ways to respond to, mental health disorders or stress. You as an employee, what do you do to ensure that You do not transfer the burden of managing your mental health issue to an employer. That things like practicing self-care. You know, how well do you attend to your challenges? How well do you attend to your needs? Most people haven't embraced self-care because they feel they need to meet other people's expectations first rather than themselves. You know, first look into yourself, meet your personal expectations and needs, you know, before looking out on how best to meet someone else's expectation. So acknowledging and understanding your reactions within work. How well do you react to a problem when you've encountered it? Or if you have your own problem you're dealing with, do you acknowledge that you have that challenge? Do you understand it? And how well do you react to, you know, to people around you? You know, this only helps you to manage it much better. I think this, I have majorly talked about it. Checking in with yourself, self-introspection. Do you know what you're dealing with? Do you evaluate your emotions? Do you evaluate your thoughts? You know, when you're dealing with something, how well do you attend? How well do you manage it before, you know, going to work, or when you're in a work environment? How well do you express yourself when you're dealing with the mental health challenge? You know, think about how you are feeling, and so on. So there are so many things that we can do as employees to manage, employers and employees to manage these mental health disorders. You know, we are talking about at an individual level. What are your eating habits? How healthy do you eat? This is part of self-care. You know, what is your intake of certain things, certain foods or certain drugs? You know, do you take plenty of water at a personal level? You know, are you active? You're dealing with a problem, yes, but how active are you? You know, do you practice some form of relaxation? What are your thoughts? Are you a person who practices self-affirmation? You know, or you are a person who's just immersed on negativity? So adopting and embracing and practicing positive affirmation is pivotal in managing common mental disorders like stress. I would want to, in the interest of time, I would want to stop here.